Howdy. Welcome to Ausgrave Royalty. I am Justin. We are here for Season 3. What a journey it's been. Oh, man. Season 3. Does that make this channel a veteran yet? I don't know. It feels like it. We started out Season 1 with laying the theoretical groundwork for archetypal psychology with Dr. Anthony Stevens' book, Archetypes, A Natural History of the Self. And then we just recently finished Robert L. Moore and Douglas Gillette's King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which went into the application of archetypal psychology. Now we're continuing in that tradition with The Gods of Every Man and Goddesses of Every Woman by Jean Shinoda Bolen. And I have the books here. Here's one. And the other. Yeah. It's going to be a good one. As I mentioned in my last video, the post-mortem on Season 2, which I highly recommend y'all check out, this is going to be the most subjective of the material that we've covered. This is the material most for the general audience. And I guess by Season 3 here, this channel might get a reputation of being kind of out there and new agey and corny, talking about gods and goddesses, archetypes, all this quote-unquote nonsense. I don't care. I really enjoy it. I hope you all do too, but I think it's useful, and I've stated several times on the channel why, that it's just another tool in the toolbox we can use for doing self-help on our own, as we've spoke about endlessly on this channel by now. The great Alan Watts said that how is the self that needs the help supposed to be also the self that does the helping, right? So the term self-help is like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. But to that challenge, archetypal psychology, I think, offers at least a partial solution. Maybe not so good at solving every particular problem you encounter, but at least a way to find out what the problems in your life are. And that's what a lot of the last season was about. This season is more, it's kind of part Season 1, part Season 2, which is why I think it's a nice ornament to complement the other two seasons. Yes, there's theory in Season 3 that she talks about based on the myths of the Greco-Roman gods and goddesses, which we'll get into in a moment. Yes, there's application, which we'll definitely talk about, how being familiar with these gods and goddesses can help inform, similarly to King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, although to a more specialized extent, about how to look inward from that god and goddess's perspective to give you some self-knowledge, some self-awareness. But it goes without saying, definitely check out Season 1 and 2 to be kind of up to speed on the archetypal psychology we've discussed thus far. I know that's a heavy burden to place on the viewer, but damn it, it's a lot of good material. And for those who have, this is for people who have seen Season 1 and 2. It's the natural progression. I mean, it's like a TV show here. In this case, it's continuing the original arc of, no pun intended, archetypal psychology. Eventually, like I mentioned in the last video, we'll eventually be getting into other subjects, but this is continuing that arc. So just like hopping into Season 3 of any show doesn't make too much sense, you're going to be a little lost Same applies here, for better or worse. That being said, it's not impossible to enjoy if you're just jumping in. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. So, looking at my notes here, staying on track. I'm going to have another video. My next video is going to be about Jean Bolen's perspective on archetypal psychology versus Warren Gillette's versus Dr. Anthony Stevens. And I mentioned that in the last video, season 3 is going to be a bit different in that I'm going to be releasing one video per week regarding the book. The comedy videos on Sunday will still continue, and as well as what I'm calling the special media videos. Like, as of right now, it's December 17th. I record all my videos in advance. Little behind the scenes action for you there. But with the White Lotus video, those are going to be kind of spontaneous as they become topical. And I won't do a video on everything, just the topical pop culture subjects that interest me that I think have an archetypal element to them. In terms of each video on the books, it's in a way a kind of dream for a YouTuber like me in terms of how to organize the material, because I can spend one video per god and goddess. So that's what I decided to do. And so yeah, each video will be covering, after some initial videos, like I talked about comparing Bolen versus Warren Gillette versus Stevens and all that, barring some of the intro videos. After that, when we get into the gods and goddesses themselves, luckily there's enough material for one video to be on one figure, which makes it very nice. Now, within those, and in season 3, I'm not doing the ranty style videos, because within these god and goddesses videos, I'm going to talk about the god or goddess's background, how it applies. This is all from Bolen, of course. How they apply to archetypal psychology, what they mean for our own lives, and so on. The Bolen focused material is going to be at least the first 15 minutes, and roughly. And then roughly the later part, the later 15 minutes, is going to be my reaction and interpretation and how I might utilize that figure within my own life for some kind of productive self-knowledge. It may be oversimplistic to say, but you could think of each god or goddess as a tool in your self-knowledge toolbook. Again, way more highly specialized and nuanced than King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. There's pros and cons to that, which we'll get into in another video. But still, I think there's value there for self-knowledge. So, enough hype. What are the actual gods and goddesses? There are so many. What are the gods and goddesses we'll be covering? So, we'll be covering, in terms of goddesses, Artemis, Athena, Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Persephone, and Aphrodite. And in terms of the gods, we'll be covering Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Apollo, Hermes, Ares, Hephaestus, and Dionysus. In the introduction, she explains how Bolen was moved by the Jungian analyst Erich Neumann as to how the myths could be utilized as insight tools. So it reminds me of Aesop's fables in a way. And that's what inspired her to write the books. Incidentally, I have a video called In Defense of the New Age, which is all about projection. And her reasoning here reminds me of kind of my own insights. I know, like, again, I mentioned this in previous videos, but archetypes, gods, goddesses, they sound corny, very new agey, nonsensical. And yeah, check that video out. Let me know what y'all think. I would say, and I mentioned in that video that, you know, if hearing about a particular god and goddess helps someone solve a problem and they weren't able to do prior to that knowledge, then it's a win. Does it matter that it's new agey or whatever? I don't think so. If it betters their life, who cares? And if it doesn't, who cares? It's just knowledge is inert. It takes will to enact it. So just take it or leave it, basically. I'm covering these because these are tools that you might use. It can only be a benefit, basically. That's my perspective. So, Bolen says that, quote, the Greek myths and all the other fairy tales and myths that are still told after thousands of years remain current and personally relevant because there's a ring of truth in them about shared human experience. According to mythologist Joseph Campbell, dream is the personalized myth, the depersonalized dream. No wonder myths invariably seem vaguely familiar. Whenever I lectured, the response was the same. When I used myths in conjunction with clinical material, personal experiences, and insights from the women's movement, new and deeper understanding resulted. Another quote, I have realized that the power of a goddess archetype to overwhelm a woman's ego and cause psychiatric symptoms parallels the power attributed to that goddess historically. And god or goddess could be used here. And Moore and Gillette noted this. I think they actually got it from Bolen. They were contemporaries, but you don't ever want to be an archetype, right? The power of the archetypes the power for you to use them comes at keeping a healthy distance, keeping a healthy ego. So you even need to set boundaries with the archetypes themselves. For example, we talked about the warrior last season. I mean, a warrior only cares about the mission. It doesn't care about where the long term, where are you going as a warrior. It doesn't care about enjoyment of life or anything, and it doesn't care about how it gets done. It's just pure will. It's just banging its head against the wall all the time. And it needs to be like, it can work for you if you give it a mission, and it will go out and kill for you, right? Metaphorically. It'll kill all that paperwork, so on. But someone who's like in excess of the warrior is like a workaholic, and suddenly life has passed them by, and they're like, what the hell have I been doing, right? This is why the archetypes are important. You don't want to just be the warrior. In the same way, you don't want to just be a god or a goddess. They're not to be emulated. They're to be inspired by or illuminated by. Moore says that the archetypes are radioactive. And Bolen mentions that they're imperialistic. Each one of them wants all of you. That's why sometimes decisions are hard to make. They're in your inner boardroom, which your ego is like the chairman of the board. You have all the gods and goddesses, or king, warrior, magician, lover, as we talked about last season, whatever paradigm you want to use, all these voices pulling you in different directions. And it's your ego who has to make that final call after hearing all the voices out. In a perfect world. What you don't want is the warrior grabbing the ego, throwing him out of the boardroom, and just saying, I'm in charge now. And all we're going to do is work, work, work. This is the new modus operandi for what we're going to be up to. Granted, someone could be a workaholic, but consciously. Like there's a time and a place to be working, but that has to be a conscious thing. I'm talking about it's unhealthy to be unconsciously a workaholic. Like, I don't know what else to do, I'm just going to work. That's not healthy. Just like I don't know what else to do, I'm going to eat. Fill in the blank, right? If any of that sounds interesting to you, that's what all of season 2 is about. And we're continuing in this similar vein with season 3, right? So Bolen has another quote here. While these books, advance theory and provides information helpful to therapists, it is written for everyone who wants to understand women better. Replace it with men if you want, especially those women who are closest, dearest, or most mystifying to them. And for women to discover the goddesses within themselves. Again, or men to discover the gods within themselves. I, Justin, am covering this material, so we can increase our awareness. A friendly reminder, basic Jungian stuff. Men can access goddesses through their anima. Masculine accessing the feminine, right? And women can access the gods via their animus. It's the contrasexual connection right there, through the anima and the animus. All human beings have all the archetypes of both masculine and feminine. So lessons from goddesses can apply to men, and lessons from the gods can apply to women. Bolen says, quote, these gods or goddesses are powerful, invisible predispositions that affect personality, work, and relationships. The gods have to do with emotional intensity or distance, preferences for mental acuity, physical exertion, or aesthetic sensibility, yearning for ecstatic merger or paranormic understanding, sense of time, and much, much more. To feel authentic means to be free to develop traits and potentials that are innate predispositions. And this is further emphasized with what we covered in season 1 with Dr. Stevens defining what the hell archetypes actually are. So that's what season 1's all about. Bolen also speaks of the process involved with individuation. Quote, however, conformity to the stereotype is often an agonizing process for a man or woman whose archetypal patterns differ from what he or she should be. He may appear to be fit, but in truth he has managed at great cost to look the part by cutting off important aspects of himself. Or he may have stretched one dimension of his personality to fit expectations, but lacks depth and complexity, which often makes his outer success inwardly meaningless. And that's perfect for someone who's out of touch. I'm coming from the Moore and Gillette paradigm of king, warrior, magician, lover. That's someone who's out of touch with their lover. Like they're accomplishing all this stuff, and yet they don't feel fulfilled at all. They're out of touch with the lover. So re-encountering these lost parts is what individuation literally is. She continues, quote, when you enact a role that is connected to an active archetype within you, energy is generated through the depth and meaning that the role has for you. As archetypes, the gods exist as patterns governing emotions and behavior. They are powerful forces that demand their due, recognized or not. Archetypes are pre-existent or latent, internally determined patterns of being and behaving, or perceiving and responding. These patterns are contained in a collective unconscious, that part of the unconscious that is not individual, but universal or shared. These patterns can be described in a personalized way as gods or goddesses. Their myths are archetypal stories. Myths provide, this is still Bolen, myths provide the possibility of an aha insight. Something rings true and we intuitively grasp the nature of a human situation more deeply. All the gods are potential patterns in the psyches of all men and women. Yet, in each individual, some of these patterns are activated, energized, or developed, and others are not. Archetypes might also be compared to the blueprints contained in seeds. And this is consistent with what we've covered on the channel so far in regards to the archetypal dynamics. And veterans of the channel, this is all old news, right? So pat yourself on the back for that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can have, from what she's saying, a pretty good, what they call a good enough life, and be a good enough person, and have still not accessed some of the archetypes that were available to you. Maybe, you spent your whole life doing the responsible thing. You raised a family, whatever, and you never got into that creative space, like artistic. Maybe you had a good life, but yeah, you never had the opportunity or inclination or whatever to get into the arts at all. You were just kind of all business and you felt satisfied. That is fine. It's not about better or worse. Frankly, I would say potentially that you only care about any of this stuff if you're having some sort of challenge in your life. There are those blessed few that seem to have, like, they were just born at the right time in the right generation to have the exact predisposition to succeed in that society they find themselves in. And if they don't struggle with an issue, they're never going to search for a solution. Why would they? Why would someone search for a solution for which is a solution to a problem they're not having, right? Don't fix what ain't broken, basically. Now, I will say that is in the vast minority. So, and yeah, let me know what y'all think about that. Looking at my notes here. So yeah, okay, right. I should mention this. Bolen is writing these in the mid to late 80s. And the research for the books was probably prior to that. So that's the era she's coming from. And let's just say things have changed in society, especially like with, social media and the way we interact with each other. And the debate is still out as to whether it's been a net benefit or not to society. And because we're talking about masculine and feminine, and she's coming from society in the 80s. Like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think relations between the sexes have done nothing but rapidly deteriorate. Just like you hear the thing about people getting into their own, like the algorithms, right? they foster a sort of echo chamber, whether you like it or not. You click on this, whatever you click on, you're going to get more of. And then all of a sudden you're down this rabbit hole and you're kind of cradled by the algorithm, and your world has become very limited based on what the algorithm thinks you would like and what you've seen thus far. So it just feeds you more of that, thus reducing the overall landscape of what's out there. So people, and I'm thinking in politics, get into their like siloed things. Maybe it's conspiratorial, maybe it's radically pro-government, maybe it's who knows what. In the same way, I think people, like when it comes to relations between men and women, they're sort of more atomized than ever before as society is kind of separated. Studies show that like dating apps, around like 80 or 90% of the women are chasing the top 10% of profiles on dating apps. So that's created a weird dichotomy. I have a video on the manosphere, and for those who don't know, I've been through it. It's just basically, what would I say? It's a place for men to air their grievances. That's a gross oversimplification, and there are thousands of nuances within that. But yeah, it's I mention all this because we're talking about the gods and goddesses, and she's writing in the 80s. So it's another interesting reason why I wanted to do a season on this material, because it is a bit dated, but that doesn't mean irrelevant. I think it could be interesting information when we take the lessons of these gods and goddesses and we apply them in the world of 2022, 2023, in the 2020s basically, as compared to the 80s. And maybe there's some value we can draw from that. And she does have a feminist kind of attitude. That's her paradigm. But I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it does, but I don't think the feminism she was involved with is what we think of feminism today. And that's a credit to Bolen. That's where I'm choosing to come from, I think, to interpret her work here. Also, I'll have links and everything. Be sure and check the description of all my videos. I pack it with anything I mention, or I try to. I may miss some here and there, but if I throw out some kind of figure or whatever, I try and have a link to where I got that from. She has a website herself, so this is unofficial. And again, yeah, I say this all the time, but I'm not an expert. Don't take my word for anything. I would describe myself as an enthusiastic fan, and I'm trying to start a discussion about all this. Yeah, this channel, for those who are new, is just about great ideas. Right now, again, we're kind of in the archetypal psychology arc of the channel, because that's what I've been into lately. But if you saw my last video on the post-mortem of Season 2, I've got tons of plans for other kinds of material. But anyway, that'll wrap up this video. I really look forward to seeing y'all in the subsequent videos about the gods and goddesses and what you all think about them. Again, check out Season 1 and 2 for more context. They're really good. Anyway, I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye-bye.